Hello everyone, welcome back, and today's video got another season preview video here to discuss. Today we're looking at the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders, the two New York teams. We'll see how they both did last year as both teams made the playoffs, and also see how both teams are shaping up going into next year after their off-season moves. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. We're going to love you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so we can also listen to this video. So we've got the two New York teams here to discuss. The 5th and 6th teams in the Metro Division we're discussing here in our season preview series. So we're going to start with the New York Islanders. Last year was a year where they were on the fringe of making the playoffs for most of the season, but a late season surge were able to get them a few points ahead of the playoff spot. Actually got them into third in the Metro. The middle of the Metro was really weak this year, so they were able to get a record of 39, 27, and 16 for 94 points. Good enough for third in the Metro, but 7th in the Eastern Conference and 15th in the NHL. So it was a decent season there from the Islanders. Not one to be overly fond of, but they were at least able to make the playoffs and be a decent team. So interesting note there. They had 246 goals for, which is tied for 22nd in the NHL. So it wasn't an overly great season when it comes to goal scoring for them. Well, their defense, which is usually pretty good, and Sorokin, which is usually fantastic, took a step back last year. It gave up 263 goals against, which was tied for 19th lowest in the NHL. So it wasn't overly great for the Islanders, both goal scoring wise and defensive wise, both in the bottom half of the league. So bad stuff there. If you look at their point scores from the regular season, Barzal led the team, no surprise there, 80 points last year. He was followed by Noah Dobson, who had a fantastic season with 70 points, and then Brock Nelson had 69 points. So they actually had a couple of decent offensive players last year. Dobson took major strides. Barzal looked like his old self again, so interesting to note there. If you look at the goal scorers, 3 players did hit over 30 goals. It was their 3 leading goal scorers. That was Brock Nelson, who had 34 goals, Bo Horvat, who had 33 goals, and Kyle Palmieri, who had 30 goals. So interesting to note there, but they did have a couple of solid 30 goal scorers in Horvat, Barzal, and Palmieri. The rookie scoring leader for the New York Islanders was Kyle McLean. McLean, who did play some forced line minutes last year, looked pretty good. Had 4 goals, 5 assists, and 9 points. Was their team leader with the rookies, so pretty good stuff there. As we just talked about, this team made the playoffs as the 3rd team in the Metro Division. They took on the high-ranked Carolina Hurricanes in their first round series, and after being eliminated by them in 6 games in round 1 the year prior, they wound up being eliminated again. They would wind up losing the first, I think, with 3 games of the series, 1-1 in double overtime to make it a 3-1 series, and then lost game 5 to lose in 5 games. So it was not an overly great series there for the Islanders. They had a couple of chances to make it a closer series, but blew it. So it was a really bad series there for the Islanders. Their scoring leaders, Barzal led the team in that little series of 5 games with 5 points. He was a point per game, looked pretty good. Brock Nelson and Anders Lee both had 4 points, so those two had pretty decent series as well, while Brock Nelson and Matthew Barzal led the team with 2 goals. So interesting to note there, but they're coming off an interesting season last year for the New York Islanders. If you look at their additions and losses from last year, there's not really a whole bunch to talk about here. If you look at their additions, brought back Oliver Wahlstrom on a 1-year deal, and then also signed Holmstrom, McLean, and Riley. Riley was UFA, the other 3 are RFAs. Still some talk about Wahlstrom potentially being moved, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Their 2 additions in free agency were Anthony Duclair and Liam Foudy. Foudy should challenge for a bottom 6 role. Duclair's going to be a fantastic top 6 addition there for them, so Duclair's a fantastic addition. Foudy's a pretty good addition, but didn't really add too much. If you look at what they lost, they lose Kyle Clutterbuck and Matt Martin, who were 2 key 4th line cornerstone pieces for them. They're both currently UFAs. They also lose Otto Koivula, who's a solid bottom end player. He's UFA. They lose Sebastian Aho on the defensive end to Pittsburgh. They lose Robert Bortuzzo on the defensive end to Utah, and they lose Robin Salo on the defensive end as UFA. So all in all, not overly great there from the depth perspective, as they did lose a couple of decent depth defenders, also lose a couple of depth forwards, but I think the addition of Duclair really does outweigh any of the losses. So they may have lost a little bit of depth, but their offense does get a little bit better. I feel like their trades, they made no trades during the offseason. Surprising here, but there have been no trades in the New York Islanders during this offseason period that weren't pick for pick swaps. So interesting to note there. Their top 3 picks from this past year's draft, 1 was first round, 20th overall. They took Cole Yzerman. Yzerman's a fantastic player. Someone I was expecting was going to go in the top 5, maybe top 10. Winds up falling to them at 20. He's going to be a fantastic top 6 goal scorer for the Islanders in a little bit of time. So that's a pretty good pickup there for New York. They also get Jesse Pulkkinen, a left shot defenseman, 2nd round, 54th overall. That's going to be a really good pickup there too. Looks like he could eventually be a 2nd or 3rd pair defenseman there, so that's a pretty good pickup there. And they also take Kamel Bednarik. Bednarik was a center, taken in the second round, 61st overall. Solid young prospect, should eventually be challenging for like a third, fourth line center role. So Islanders didn't have a whole bunch of draft capital, but they may do really well with what they had. So interesting to note there. The two biggest questions for this team entering training camp is one, which rookies can make it? This team has an older team. They have a really old core. So I think they need to try and add some more youth to this team. Could a guy like William Dufour in the forward group make it? Could Simon Holmstrom have a bigger role in this upcoming season? Could a guy like Matthew Maggio compete for a roster spot? Could Bolduc be a solid NHLer this year? There's a couple of other young guys on that forward group too, so I'm not exactly sure who will end up making the team, but I think with all their movements from this offseason, there might be one or two spots open for a couple of younger forwards. So my question is, which sort of younger forwards will end up making the team, because this is an older team? And two, will Wahlstrom be moved? There's been a lot of talk after signing his extension that Wahlstrom will be moved in the not too distant future. What sort of a return could they get? Could they get like a third or fourth round pick? Would it be something similar to like the Vasily Podkolzin deal? Will they be able to get something they can use in return, like maybe another forward prospect or something like that? So it'll be interesting to see. But the two biggest questions entering training camp, in my opinion, are one, can the rookies make it? How many of them are able to make the team? And two, will Wahlstrom be moved, and what sort of a return are they able to get? So interesting note there. Going over to my current projected lineup for the team for the upcoming 24-25 season. At this point in time, I have Cal Palmieri playing on line 1 with Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal. I have Anthony Duclair playing on line 2 with Brock Nelson and William Dufour, who's a rookie. Anders Lee plays on line 3 with Jean-Gabriel Pageau and Simon Holmstrom. And line 4 is Kyle McLean with Casey Cizikas and Pierre Engvall. So that's a decent forward group in my opinion. Defensively, I have Adam Pelech playing with Noah Dobson, Ryan Pulak playing with Alex Romanov, and Mike Riley playing with Scott Mayfield. Sorokin's the starter again, Varlamov's the backup again, and Fasching and Bolduc are 2 spares, and that would be a cap-compliant roster. So that's an interesting lineup in my opinion for the New York Islanders for this upcoming season. Going over to my current projected point total for the Islanders for this upcoming season. Now, I have them taking a tiny bit of a step back. It's not that they didn't get overly bad or anything, but they did lose a tiny bit of depth, even though I like the Duclair addition. They did make a whole bunch of changes, even though there was a lot of talk that they might move off a couple of veterans. And on top of that, some of the teams who were behind them got a little bit, like Washington got a whole bunch better this year. You could say Pittsburgh may have gone a tiny bit better. I think Ottawa got a ton better this year. Detroit might have gone slightly better. Buffalo might have gone slightly better. So even Montreal and Columbus should have better seasons. So I think the Islanders will take a tiny bit of a step back. Not anything drastic or anything, but I do think at this point in time they'll fall off a playoff spot. So I have them finishing with 86 points. That's 8 points lower than last year. It's not a huge fall off, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were closer to a playoff spot or maybe even slightly in a playoff spot, but I have them missing the playoffs right now by 6 points. So I think they're going to be close. I think it's going to be really tight for the New York Islanders, but this current point in time, I think there are just too many good teams ahead of them to wind up having them make the playoffs. So interesting up there, but I have them finishing with 86 points, 8 points lower than last year, and missing the playoffs. So interesting note there. If we go to 3, as you can see, this team improve and get better for next year. 1, I think they need to have more offense. We saw it last year. They were one of the lower end teams in the offensive category. Need to score more. I think the addition of Duclair will help that. If they can get a couple of younger guys that could do 4 in there, that might be able to help that too. If they can get some more of these offensive weapons going, that could easily help that. So interesting note there, but I think more offense. Better Sorokin. Sorokin was definitely off his game last year. Didn't look like himself. They went to Varlamov towards the stretch run for the New York Islanders. So if they can have a better Sorokin, someone who's played like he has over the past few seasons, this team's going to be lethal and have a much better chance of improving. And finally, they need some youth growing. Like I said, this team is an older veteran core. They need to have some more youth in this team, whether that's just guys like Dobson or Romanov taking the next step, Holmstrom taking the next step, or whether that's having some of the younger guys like Dufour or Maggio or Bolduc get into the lineup. I think they need to have some of the younger guys take some growth steps this year. So in my opinion, more offense, a better Sorokin, and young guys taking steps are the 3 main reasons I can see this team improve to get better for next year. And lastly, going over to my rating for this team. Now this team did already in the offseason, like I said, didn't make too many additions, lost a couple of depth pieces, didn't make any trades, so not really a whole bunch there. Did really good in the draft, so I'm going to give this team a C-. I think they did about average. I think the addition of Duclair is going to really help them. I think down the road, some of those draft picks are going to be really good for them, but they did lose a little bit of depth, which is a little bit concerning for me, especially with them being an older team. So I do think the Islanders had a really interesting offseason, but I think a C-, right around average rating is warranted for this team for how they did this offseason. offseason. So that's my opinion on the New York Islanders. Going over to the other New York team and the New York Rangers. Now for the New York Rangers, last year was a season to remember for them. They finished with a record of 55-23-4 for 114 points. Won the President's Trophy, first in the Metro, East, and the league. So they were the best team in the NHL in the regular season, just being out teams at the Stars and the Carolina Hurricanes. So they had a fantastic season. Last year they had 282 goals for. That was 6th in the NHL, so they were nearly a top 5 goal scoring team. So they had a fantastic season offensively. Defensively, 229 goals against, which was 7th in the NHL. So also just outside the top 5, and were a really good defensive team as well. So team was really good offensively, team was really good defensively. Team won the President's Trophy, so the Rangers had a fantastic season last year. Their point scoring leaders, Panarin led the way with a whopping 120 points. It was a fantastic season from Panarin. Trocheck was second on the team with 77 points, and Kreider was third with 75 points. So had multiple 70-plus point players. I think they had multiple 60-plus point players. Had a 120-point player in Panarin, so they had a fantastic season. Goal scorers, Panarin also led the team in that category with 49 goals, while Kreider had 39, and Lafreniere had 28. So only 2 players hit the 30-plus goal mark, but it was interesting to see, and good to see Lafreniere be in the top 3 in goal scoring. The rookie scoring leader was Will Cooley, who had 13 goals, 8 assists, and 21 points. Pretty solid season for Cooley, who was mostly a bottom 6 forward last year, so that's a pretty good point total there for the Rangers. Cooley, they, like we just said, made the playoffs. Were a President's Trophy winning team, so they took on the second wildcard team, the Washington Capitals, wound up sweeping them, so it was easy work of the Washington Capitals. Went on to round 2 to face the Carolina Hurricanes. Won the first 3 games before they lost games 4 and 5, and then they were able to bounce back in game 6 in the series, so they were able to beat the Hurricanes in 6 games. Then they would take a 2-1 series lead in the conference final against Florida, but lose 3 straight and fall to the Panthers in 6 games, and wound up losing to the Panthers in the conference final to not go to the Stanley Cup final. So interesting note, there was an interesting series for the Rangers, but they fall short in the conference final to another Florida team, just like they did a couple of years ago. So interesting note there. The scoring leaders in the playoffs were Trocheck, who had 20 points for the New York Rangers in their 3 rounds, and then Zibanejad, who had 16 points. So Zibanejad and Trocheck were team leaders, while Kreider, Trocheck, and Lafreniere were the tied for the team leading goals with 8 goals. So interesting to note there. But that was an interesting season last year for the Rangers that saw them fall just short of making the Stanley Cup final. If you look at their additions and losses, not too much here. They brought back Ryan Lindgren, Braden Schneider, Matthew Robertson, and Chad Ruhwedel. Not too much there. All of them are RFAs except for Ruhwedel, who is UFA. Bringing Sam Carrick, who should be a solid 4th-line center. Then Olivier Giroux, who should be a good depth addition there. And Casey Fitzgerald, who I think should be a solid depth addition there on the defensive end. So only make a couple of small additions there on the free agent market. On the losses side, they lose Alex Wennberg, who was a deadline addition to San Jose. Lose Jack Roslovic, who's a deadline addition to Carolina. Lose Blake Wheeler, who's currently UFA. Tyler Pitlick, who's currently UFA. Lose Nick Patan, who's a depth forward, to Minnesota. And they lose Eric Gustafsson, who was a decent 6th-7th defenseman last year, to Detroit. So definitely made a couple of interesting losses. I mean, they didn't have Wennberg and Roslovic for the entirety of the season, but I think the losses of guys like Wheeler and Gustafsson are really bad. If you look at their trades, they made one small move. It was to get some forward help in their top 6. They traded their 2025 5th-round pick and 2027 2nd-round pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Riley Smith with a $3.75 million cap hit. So a little bit of money retained on the Penguins side, but Smith should be a really good addition there for the Rangers, as Smith is going to fit in really well in the top 6. So not too much movement here when it comes to the offseason, but they definitely made some moves. Look at their top 3 picks from this past year's draft. They had their 1st-round pick, 30th overall, took EJ Emery, who looks like he's eventually going to be like a solid 2nd pair defenseman. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Rangers. Then they didn't have another pick until the 4th round, 119th overall, where they took center Raul Bullard. Bullard, I think, eventually could be a solid 3rd, 4th-line center for that team. And then in the 5th round, 159th overall, they took left winger Nathan Espinal. Espinal, I think, eventually could be a really good 3rd-line forward there for the Rangers. So all in all, they didn't have too many draft picks. That hit home on pretty much all of them that they were able to draft, especially the Emery ones. So pretty good pickups there. 2 biggest questions entering training camp, in my opinion, for the New York Rangers is 1, will Othman make the team? This team is really good on the forward group, but the addition of Smith, the addition of Carrick should give them a little more depth on the forward group. But I do wonder if Brennan Othman, who had a fantastic season last year in the AHL, got some looks at the NHL level, could maybe make the NHL on a consistent basis this year. Could he be a solid top 9 forward, maybe work well with guys like Kako and Hilo on the 3rd line? I think that's a possibility, so we're going to have to wait and see, but I think a big question is, will Othman make the team? Another one is the Shesterkin extension. A lot of people fully expect it to happen in the not too distant future, but Shesterkin's still unsigned at this point. He's the Rangers' backbone of the team at this point in time. He kept them in that series against Florida last year, so the Rangers really want to sign him, I'm probably going to try and sign for somewhere around like 11.5 to 12 million. It will be a really big ask for Shesterkin, but I definitely do think that that's another big question looming as we enter training camp. So the two biggest questions in my opinion for the Rangers is one, will Often make the team, and two, what happens with the Shesterkin extension. So we're going to have to wait and see on those two things. Going over to my projected lineup for this team for a 24-25 season. At this point in time, I have Kreider playing on line 1 with Mika Zibanejad and Riley Smith. I have line 2 being the line 2 from last year, which worked out really well, Panera and Trocheck Lafreniere. I have line 3 being Brandon Othman with Phil Pedal and Capo Caco, and I have Will Cooley on line 4 with Sam Carrick and Matt Rempe. That's a solid forward group. Defensively, I have Keandre Miller with Am Fox. I have Ryan Lindgren with Braden Schneider, and I have Jacob Trouba with Zach Jones. That's a pretty good defensive core. I have Shesterkin being the starter, Quick being the backup, and then I have VC, Bardzinski, and Ruedel being the 3 spares, and that would be a cap compliant roster for the New York Rangers. So all in all, that's a decent lineup in my opinion for New York, and I think it will be a lineup that could take them back to the playoffs again. Speaking of the playoffs, my projected point total for this team for the upcoming season, I have them taking a slim step back, not a whole bunch of a step back. They're still a really good team. Sure, they lost Wennberg, sure, they lost Roslovic, but they added Smith. I definitely think they're around the same as they were pre-trade deadline last year, so I think they're going to be a really good team again this year. Maybe not win the President's Trophy again, but I do think they're going to take a slight step back. So at this point in time, I have them finishing with 111 points, 3 lower than last year, second in the Metro at this point in time. So I think they're going to be a really dominant team. Could easily see them win the Metro again this year, but still, it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But at this point in time, I have the Rangers finishing with 111 points, 3 lower than last year, being second in the Metro. Still one of the top end teams in the NHL and the Metro. So interesting note there. But that's my prediction right now for the New York Rangers. If you look at threes, this team can improve to get better. One, they need some more better depth. Last year, like we said, they had some pretty good offense, but that was led mostly by the top 6. So if they can get some more bottom 6 help and have some of the guys like Keedle stay healthy, I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Rangers if they can get some more better depth scoring. They need to have their young guys continue to grow. We saw Lafreniere take steps last year. Miller looked pretty good last year. Can Schneider take another step this year? Can Kako take another step this year? I know Heedle was injured last year, but can he take another step? Can guys like Othman and Cooley wind up working out really well in the bottom 6 this year? So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens there, but can these guys all take steps? This is going to be a big question in my opinion for the New York Rangers. And 3 is a better year from Kako. If Kako can have the same sort of improvements that Lafreniere did last year, I think this Rangers team will be a lot better. I think Kako in a top 9 role can still be a really good solid producer, at least like 35 to 45 points. So if Kako can take that step, I think this Rangers team is going to be a whole bunch more scary than it was last year. So interesting note there, but the 3 are going to see this team improve is 1, better depth, 2, the young guys continue to grow, and 3, a better season from Kako. And finally here, looking at my rating for this team for this past season. Now, this team actually did quite well in my opinion. Like I said, they didn't make too many moves, but they did bring in Carrick and Jewell in free agency, as well as Fitzgerald. They added a guy like Smith in the trade. So they basically replaced Wheeler. Like, they did lose Gustafsson, which was a bad blow, but they do have a lot of really good D prospects in their system. So in my eyes, this was a pretty good offseason for Rangers, so I'm just going to give them slightly above average and a C+ rating. I don't think they did anything flashy. I don't think they did anything spectacular. I think they definitely improved a slight bit, even though they lost maybe a tiny bit of depth. But like I said, I think Smith was better than any of the guys they lost. I think Carrick should produce some really good bottom 6 additions. So in my opinion, I'm going to give the Rangers a decent C+ rating. I think it's warranted for how they did this offseason. So that's all I'm talking about for today. Let's hear your guys' thoughts on the New York teams down in the comment section below. What do you think about how they did last year? Do you think both these teams did good in the offseason, or do you think they did bad? And what do you think about my predictions for the lineup and for the team for this upcoming season? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Definitely leave your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk about for today. Until this video, if you're interested, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support right now with you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment in the comment section below so we can all discuss in this video. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. Leave a link down in the description below. And can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.